Welcome to SSHA Academic Advising's Virtual Open House Week. We are excited for y'all to be connected with the faculty from the Anthropology and Heritage Studies Department. My name is Kitia Macias. I'm an academic advisor in SSHA Academic Advising. I will be your moderator for today's panel. Before we begin, let me go over a few Zoom guidelines, and then I will have our panelists introduce themselves. Please ensure that you all keep your microphones and videos off throughout the panel. If you think of questions you want to ask the panelists, please use the chat feature at the bottom of your Zoom screen to privately message me your questions. At any time, if your Wi-Fi disconnects, feel free to join the Zoom link again and you'll be let back in. With that being said, let's get started with introductions from our panelists. I will first hand it off to Professor Hull.
Hello, I'm Kathleen Hull. I'm a professor in, obviously, Anthropology and Heritage Studies. My specialty is anthropological archaeology, and I've been at UC Merced since 2006.
I'm Stephen Wooding, and I'm an assistant professor of anthropology here at UC Merced. I'm interested in projects both on campus and abroad. I enjoy working with undergraduates and look forward to hearing from you.
I guess I'll go next. I'm Beth Scafidi. I'm a new, well, it still feels new. I started last year, so I'm just finishing a first year assistant professor, coming from 2.5 years of a postdoc at Arizona State University. I apologize, you're going to hear some barking in the background from my office mate here. So if I'm talking, I apologize about that. And I'm an anthropological bioarchaeologist, so I study human skeletons from archaeological sites, mostly in the Andes, in the central Andes. Some forensic type oriented research questions pop up every once in a while as well. But I integrate bioarchaeological analysis of bones when we have access to those in the field in my work, as well as some geospatial technologies, and I direct the skeletal and environmental isotope lab at UC Merced, which is almost up and running and ready to go for student volunteers and interns and UROC-H and whatever other types of lab opportunities I can scare up for people. So it's nice to be here.
Thank you all for those introductions. So can you all please just tell me a little bit more about your department and what your department has to offer students within your major and minors?
I could start us off, since I'll deal with sort of the nuts and bolts to start out with, and then so anthropology is the study of people, very broadly defined. Our program offers 3 of the 4 major subfields of anthropology. So social cultural anthropology, which deals with living people, their culture, their beliefs, practices, that kind of thing. Anthropological archaeology, which I do, which is looking at people in the past, those same kinds of things, people in the past. And then biological anthropology, which my 2 colleagues here can tell you a lot more about than I can. We are unique in the UC system, I think, and in a lot of programs in having a strong basis in methods. We have a methods requirement in our major, both field methods and laboratory or archival methods. We have a strong topical or sort of theoretical perspective rather than geographic perspective compared to a lot of programs. So if you look at our catalog of classes, you'll see that we have classes that deal with, colonialism or space and place or death, dying, and dead persons, or, race and human variability. So very, very topical courses in that respect. So I will hand it off to my colleagues.
Well, yeah, you're the expert in that area, Kathleen.
Beth, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I don't have as much knowledge as Dr. Hull and Dr. Wooding, since I just got here and just have only taught 2 undergraduate classes now in the spring. But I can tell you that one of the things, in addition to kind of the emplaced focus of our training for students. We're not an applied anthropology and heritage studies department, but we have a focus on helping students to acquire marketable skills through their degrees. And so that's something that my classes are going to definitely be emphasizing in the future. So a class, a bioarchaeological isotope class with me, or an archaeological sciences class with me in the future might have students in the lab with me, pipetting samples, crushing out bone, weighing and analyzing things, 3D scanning samples. So we are really trying to emphasize not just the theory of what we do, but also the practice, and giving students some concrete skills. I know last semester, my students worked with spreadsheets. They did a kind of a bioarchaeological meta-analysis, like a research project on published literature, since we weren't able to be together in class looking at bones. And that was great because all of them learned how to use Excel, which is something that a lot of them did not have any experience with. And it's definitely an important part of any job that you might get. So yeah, I think that's kind of unique about our program so far.
Yes, I think that one of the underlying themes we're talking about here is that we value giving students skills that they can carry forward with them. Having methodological abilities enables you to take the best advantage as you move forward, both in your career in anthropology at UC Merced and then outside UC Merced. Concrete skills can really help propel you.
I'll just add to that because of the nature of our program, this combination of method and theory and topics, it allows students to do research with faculty, as Dr. Wooding and Dr. Scafidi have mentioned. They've had students working on projects for them, prepares students well for a variety of careers, and anthropology in general prepares people for a variety of careers, whether it's specifically, closely tied to anthropology, like being an archaeologist in the private sector or for a government, or working in museums, or more generally, the skills as a social scientist that we develop as anthropologists are really helpful in a variety of settings, whether it's working for non-governmental agencies or government agencies, or healthcare, or in Silicon Valley, Google. We have graduates who've gone to work in Silicon Valley and so forth. So the kinds of skills that are developed and the kinds of thinking that anthropology sort of promotes really helps in a variety of professional settings.
Thank you for that. You all brought up like mentioning courses and like the skills that students gain from your courses are really just the programs within your department. Can you kind of elaborate or just specify like those transferable skills that students gain and how they can apply those to careers or graduate school after they graduate for the future?
In my own work, there are a couple of areas. One is I enjoy doing field research with students, where they work with me outside the university in situations where I'm doing actual research. And those provide students with opportunities and just basic experience in the scientific process. What is it like as an anthropologist to go to an actual study site and be doing some work there? One of the nice things about it is that it's a genuinely fun thing to do. I get a great deal of personal enjoyment out of doing it and look forward to the opportunities I have every year to go to a field site. You can see behind me is a jungle environment. That's a photograph of a place where I go in the Amazon rainforest. I also do some laboratory research. From a course standpoint, we're just about to offer a new course, which I'll be teaching for the first time this spring, called Quantitative Methods in Anthropology. And that course, again, returning to our theme earlier, is a methods course that should give students some skills to take forward with them and provide concrete training in issues such as how to perform statistical tests, and how to analyze different kinds of data.
I'll add to that. So anthropology classes in general are going to develop writing skills, which are important in any profession, to be a clear writer and a clear thinker. So all of our courses sort of develop those, very fundamental practical skills that are useful in graduate school or in any profession. As Steve mentioned, right, analyzing qualitative and quantitative data, anthropologists deal with both of those kinds of data. And so we develop those skills with our students as well. They're skills that we use every day. And then there are even more technical skills that are more related to anthropology in general. For example, I teach a class on analyzing stone tools. That's very specific. Beth teaches the classes on analyzing human bones. That's very specific. But the kinds of tools that we use to do those kinds of analysis and record our data, Beth mentioned Excel, for example, and being able to, run various kinds of statistical analyses or use those kinds of that software to present data, say graphically or something like that. Those are all skills that are developed, and they're useful for graduate school if you go on in anthropology or in another field, and they're really useful for careers as well, right? You can say, I've developed these skills, I'm really competent at doing this, and I'm a critical thinker and a good writer too.
And I think the other thing that is the thing that's so wonderful about anthropology, and the reason that I started off my life in undergrad as a music major, and then switched to anthropology quick as a sophomore quickly, and had basically enough credits to do like classwork archaeology, which was a major where at UNC Chapel Hill, where I went to school, and anthropology. So on paper, I really had a hard time choosing between like anthropology and classical archaeology, because I thought that it all was so cool. And then ended up going to law school, was a criminal attorney for a couple of years, came back to get my PhD in anthropology. And so one of the things that I think is so awesome about our field, and anthropology and heritage studies, is that when you're studying human behavior in the past or in the present or in the future, I suppose, you really have the opportunity to open wide the doors of what kind of falls within that scope. So a lot of anthropologists and archaeologists are just inherently interdisciplinary collaborators and transdisciplinary collaborators. So it's really, in addition to all these kind of hard skills that students can get in an anthropology course, they can get an anthropological mindedness that's really valuable for being able to approach a problem from lots of different viewpoints. And I think our department is growing collaborations outside of the anthropology department. Dr. Hull is, correct me if I get this wrong, she's at the Sierra Nevada Research Institute. I'm involved with the Health Sciences Research Institute as well. I think Dr. Wooding maybe as well. So we work in different parts of UC Merced and in projects in lots of different communities and lots of different places. So it's just a really broad scope that students have access to when they take our courses.
Thank you. And so going back to those, well, I guess your courses that are taught at UC Merced within your department, what are some of the behaviors that what are some good academic behaviors to be successful in those courses, and also to get the most out of those courses?
I can offer to kick us off here. I think, what makes you a successful student in anthropology probably makes you a successful student in any of the disciplines on campus. But start with being engaged, right? It means doing the reading and coming to class and doing the assignments and asking questions to really probe the aspects of the topic that are particularly interesting to you, or puzzling to you, right? So being an engaged student is number one. Do what is being asked of you because your professors know what they're doing, right? We're including certain assignments, we're reiterating certain things in certain ways, giving you sort of different angles to kind of approach a problem. And so there's a plan there that may not be totally clear to you, but is totally clear to your professor. So I'll start off with that.
I think a valuable strategy that a lot of students don't realize they can take such advantage of is trying to interact with faculty and also graduate students outside of class. One way I often try to describe this, in particular to younger students, is that when you're admitted to UC Merced, we're inviting you to be part of this intellectual community. And even the professors, these higher up people, are eager to talk to the youngest people. And you should feel free to take advantage of that. A specific example of that is if a student wants to talk to me about, with me, it's just about anything, their academic career or specific issues in anthropology. I'm eager to talk to them about it. I don't think I've ever said no to a student who wanted to talk to me. And I think that's probably true for most professors, if not all of them at UC Merced. You've become part of this society, and you are invited to participate in every way in it. It can be intimidating, but you're always welcome.
And I just have one other thing to contribute. I agree with what Dr. Hull said and what Dr. Wooding said. And definitely the anthropology is not unique. There's just like any other field, any other area of study, there's moments where you have to just memorize some things so that you can learn how to speak the language of that discipline, and you just can't get past that. Like with bone, when I teach bone classes, you just have to memorize what the features are called on the bone so you can like figure out if it's a left side or a right side. Some of those things are just, you just have to do it. We're all trying to build students' critical thinking and writing skills and those things, and presentation skills, communication skills, and those things just come with practice. So those aren't different than any other in anthropology than in any other class. The one thing that might be kind of different that probably a lot of your teachers do, a lot of your professors do that you may not notice, but I really try to emphasize in my classes students thinking in a disciplined way about how they're learning. So I have like little assessments after every quiz or every quarter or whatever, so often during the class that ask students to reflect on what they did to study and prepare for class that semester. Did it work? What do they wish they had done? What kinds of thinking are they better at doing in like a Zoom environment? And what kinds of thinking are they better doing in a quiet environment with just pen and paper? And that kind of metacognition is really what will help students succeed really in whatever they do, like learning how you learn and learning how to kind of track how you learn and figure that out for yourself. It's different for everybody. But that's one of the things that we like to think about in anthropology too. How is knowledge made? And how is it kind of made through this intersection of all the different ways that people learn and the places that they're coming from?
Great, thank you.
Sorry, my phone is ringing, but I want to add a few other things. One is time management, right? Realize that for every 1 unit of the classes, you're supposed to do 3 hours of work. And so a 4-unit class is 12 hours a week. So if you're taking a full load, that's 48 hours, right? That you're supposed to be spending, only a small portion of which of that is actually in class time. And so figuring out how you're going to manage your time to juggle, all of your classes is important. And then also, and you probably hear this often from your professors, and Steve sort of touched on it a little bit, go to office hours. I never went to office hours when I was an undergraduate. I was always so intimidated. The one time I did was not actually a very good experience, but that had to do with the professor and not with me. But take advantage of it, right? Because as Steve said, right, kind of getting to know your professors better and letting them get to know you a little bit better and feeling comfortable asking them questions and following up on the things that you may be struggling with a little bit is really helpful. It's really helpful.
Thank you for that. And I think also relatedly, I was going to say in anthropology, heritage studies, but just in general, the social sciences is very heavy on reading and writing, building those critical thinking skills and writing skills. So what advice would you give students who have questions about managing that, with their time management, and also how to actually engage within the material rather than just reading just to read, but not retaining the information?
I can offer a few suggestions. I don't know. One of the best ways to become a better writer is to be a good reader, right? You've got to do the reading. You're reading other people's work. You're seeing how they're constructing sentences. You're seeing how they're constructing arguments. You're learning new vocabulary. And so reading is super important. You've got to do the reading. And often in our classes, we'll have you read the primary literature, right? We'll have you read the articles that's written by the archaeologists for other archaeologists. And it can be really tough. What I tell my students is that, undergrads anyway, is that if you were a graduate student, I would have you read the article and tell me what it says. But since you're an undergraduate, I have you read the article and I tell you what it says, right? We're always going to back you up as professors, so if you don't understand things completely in reading, we're going to be there to backfill for you. So being a good writer is being a good reader first, and doing that. The other thing, I have a handout that I have about reading. And of course, it's a little different now. I'm old enough that, everything I read was on paper back when I was in college. And the typical thing was to read with a highlighter in your hand, right? To just highlight things that you thought were important. And I tell students, read with a pencil in your hand. A highlighter only does one thing. It only highlights. And with a pencil in your hand, you can write in the margins, you can ask questions as you go along. You can also underline, which is the equivalent of doing highlighting. But with a pencil in your hand, you can really engage with the reading and again, be a writer and reader that way. So, and then there are resources on campus to help you with writing, the Bright Center and so forth. So if you struggle, there are people who can help you with that.
I would just piggyback on what Dr. Hull said. Writing is about reading. They're two related processes. So like I'm working on a paper right now that I thought was going to be so fast and easy and fun to write. And it's taken me like a day to read all of the things in the world about this topic. And then maybe I get a paragraph written a day. So I'm having to do a lot of reading to be able to write like just a few sentences. So like read all the time, read on your phone, read in your bed, read in the bath. I'm a bathtub reader. That can get me into trouble sometimes. Read everywhere that you can. And that's how you'll get to be a better writer as well, because they go hand in hand. The other thing that I would recommend is don't forget about topic sentences. Like college level writing doesn't have to be that exact same cookie cutter writing that you learned in high school English. But a reader should be able to read the first sentence of your paragraph and understand what the heck you're going to be talking about. So even if you kind of, move away from some of those rigid structures you learned in high school, definitely still have a good introduction, definitely still have topic sentences in every paragraph that you write, and definitely have a conclusion. That's just good writing 101. And I'm totally guilty of it myself, like just because a lot of really famous writers write really poorly, actually. So we can get kind of sucked into imitating, the fancy styles of these brilliant people. but my journal article is not going to get accepted if they can't, if I write like that. And your papers probably aren't going to get good grades if you write like that. So keep practicing, don't get discouraged, especially if English is not a first language. And whether you're native English speaker or not, get help from the writing studio, get help from each other. Have a moment to get together with your study group and do peer reviews of each other's writing. It feels weird because it's so personal. Sometimes it feels like somebody's attacking you personally if they like attack the sentence that you wrote or critique the sentence you wrote, but it's so helpful. And I have to do this all the time. I mean, none of us are perfect. And I went to our writing center all the time in grad school when I had a really important grant or something. So use those resources. They're not just for bad writers to get better. They're for good writers to get better as well. And just because you're great at one kind of writing doesn't mean you're going to be great at other kinds of writing. It's a constant process of learning. So just be open to that and open to feedback and learn and grow from it.
I agree with Beth's comment about the need to be persistent and also patient. We seem to have gravitated to the same measure, which is if you can write one excellent paragraph per day, you're actually a very productive writer. As a professor, if you could do one a day, that'd be really great. I don't know how to share my screen here, but I was going to prove I take notes here. Can I share my screen?
You should be able to.
There we go.
Let's see. There we go.
There, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Right, so you can see here's a professor's actual notes. I was reading a book here. You can see I underlined things, but not too much. It's tempting to underline everything, but you can't do that. And then as Kathleen said, you don't want just a highlighter, which would be the underlines here. You want some notes on the side as well. They both reiterate your thoughts and enable you to go back. I encourage you to take notes just about at this level, not too little, not too much, and notes on the side to help remind you.
If I can add one other thing, Beth mentioned feedback, and I had a long career before I became a professor. And so I tell my students that, take advantage of this time to get feedback on your writing. Because here, the worst thing it's about is your grade. And most of us don't grade based on, how well you write. We base on your thoughts. And, we can only get at your thoughts if they're well communicated, but nonetheless. But in a job, you can get fired if you write well. So this is totally low stakes, right? I mean, it may seem like high stakes, but take this feedback and soak it in and listen to it and, put it into your next paper, because that's what we are here for. Partly is to make you better writers. And your boss at the job you go to is not going to be that way. And so take advantage of it here while you can. And I think most of us give you a lot of feedback on your writing.
Yeah, thank you for that. And one of the takeaways from all that helpful information that you provided, one of the takeaways is for students to, get if they're writing, if an assignment is due, get that done in advance. That way they can, go to the writing center for feedback, go to their TA, their professor, so they can have that reviewed and incorporate any feedback and make their paper that much better. So thank you for providing that information. I think that's
Nothing is ever done good that's last minute. And writing or anything in life, nothing is good when it's last minute.
And then so just going, going to a different topic in a way is more about research. Can you, I think you all talked about it in the beginning a bit, but can you talk more about your research interests and how students can do research with you as a professor or also with your department?
My research focuses on two areas that are at first, they seem kind of disparate, but they're actually closely connected. One of my main areas of expertise is in the genetics of taste perception, particularly bitter taste perception. Bitter taste perception is a sense that enables you, it's specialized for this purpose, to perceive toxins found in plants. Why is that important? Well, what's important is plants surround us and they have throughout our evolutionary history, so they look like a really good potential source of food. But actually, most plants produce toxins as a mechanism of defense against herbivores. Bitter taste perception targets those. And it's interesting to think about the evolution of this trait, this ability to perceive toxins and how it evolved, but also what the impact is on life today. The other aspect of my research is a field research project in which I'm interested in a particular plant. It's a plant that's very widely grown as a source of nutrition, but what's remarkable about it is that it's actually highly toxic. People around the world grow this highly toxic plant called cassava, and it's bitter. I'm interested in this bitter aspect of it and what bitterness tells you about the toxicity of this plant, and how do people manipulate it using plant domestication? So I have two sides here that join in the middle. The things that students can do with me, one is work in the laboratory. Something that's very accessible to students is actually a really fun thing for students to do, which is we rely pretty heavily on taste testing, bringing people into the laboratory and seeing what they're able to perceive and not perceive. We haven't started it yet because we're in COVID right now, but when we get back on our feet, I'll have students in the laboratory testing other students. It's a little more challenging to take them to the field because I work in a place that's very far away. However, I do all kinds of activities in the field that could use student assistance, and students are expert assistants in the field. It takes a lot of energy, and young people are strong and energetic, so they're a genuine asset to the project, not a liability to it. I'm always trying to think of ways to get students more involved. It genuinely helps me out, and it's a fun thing to do.
Thank you.
Beth, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I can go next. So research with me, I do field research in Peru and lab research here at UC Merced. I'm in the Science and Engineering building, where I think the rest of our department will be moving soon, but I'm already there, which is awesome because this is the first time I've ever been across the hall from my lab and office. So I don't have to walk like 15 minutes balancing a bunch of little glass tubes that I hope don't break on my walk over, which has been my experience so far. So I have opportunities to for students to do research in my lab. It's the Skeletal and Environmental Isotope Laboratory, and we do lots of different kinds of preparation and analysis of different kinds of isotopes, some of them from human tissues from the past. And like I said, we'll sometimes do some modern things, but only in certain cases. And the tissues from the past, from people of the past and animals of the past, and even plants of the past, can tell us what people were eating during their lifetimes, really specific things like when infants were weaned in different archaeological sites. And those are important questions because typically populations that are under stress wean earlier because they don't have, if things aren't good, they don't have time to invest that energy in their children. So they'll wean early. There's other reasons that you might wean your baby early as well. But those are the kinds of fine level, high temporal resolution questions we can answer. We can look at someone's hair. I've got mummy hair from Peru right now in the lab. That will be a student project for someone. And we can, because your hair grows at about 1 centimeter per month, however long your hair is, we'll show you how diet changed during that last year of, or however long your hair is, of life. So we're doing lots of different chemical analyses. The preparation is in my lab. Some of the chemistry is in my lab. And then the samples go over to the stable isotope and ecology lab down the hall, which is our core facility. So students will get to kind of work in both spaces. We're also doing thin section preparations of human teeth for microscopy analysis. That helps us understand different kinds of malnutrition events in childhood when the enamel was forming. That's kind of a new area of research for me, but we'll be able to work on those and prepare those in my lab, and then also go over to the imaging institute right across the hallway. So there are some really fun opportunities to work with my lab and other labs. I am kind of limiting it right now because of COVID and just space restrictions in the lab, and the fact that I don't have graduate students yet. I don't think I can handle or clean for more than 8 students in the lab per semester. So this semester, there will be one paid student success internship opportunity, and that is available. If you just Google student success internship at UC Merced, that will pop up. Those applications are live and they're due in a couple weeks. There's only one of those though, and I've had 50 plus students reach out to me with interest for the lab. So it's going to be a very competitive program. But you can also just come be a volunteer in my lab, a volunteer apprentice for the lab. If you wanted to do that, I'm just looking for like 1 or 2 2-hour chunks per week, beginning about mid-October, because I'm still waiting for some equipment to be shipped. I don't have water yet, and that's a pretty important thing that I need to get started. So that's volunteer opportunities are available in the lab. In the spring, I'm hoping to do a UROC-H cluster. So I haven't applied for the program yet because it hasn't opened up, and my application has to be accepted along with the students. But those student side of those applications will be due on November 1st. And I'm going to ask for 4 students starting in the spring. And that's a really interesting program because you work during the spring, you kind of train in the spring, you develop your own research question over the summer, you carry it out over the summer, and then I think you can apply for additional funding the following year to kind of continue doing your work. And then there's this expectation that you present your work in an academic conference the following spring, which is awesome because we go to lots of different kinds of archaeological and physical anthropology conferences that are great opportunities for students to present those kinds of projects. Those are funded, but they have a really high level of commitment. And I'm asking for 4, but I don't know how many I will get or if I'll be approved. If you are interested in going to the field with me, I'm working on a new excavation. Well, it will be a new excavation, but right now, next summer, we'll be doing, pending COVID, we'll be doing archaeological survey with 2 different drones, surface collection of a bunch of different materials that are on the surface that we'll take back here and do chemical testing on. So next summer, the goal is to figure out what site we actually want to excavate and collect some preliminary data for that and put in bigger grant applications to dig that site. I think I know the one, but we're going to systematically make sure that it's the right place. And students, I'm not sure yet what funding is like for undergraduate students. I can certainly help with room and board if students can get themselves there, and there may be some opportunities with different parts of UC Merced that can fund that travel and that research.
I'll just add to it. I know we've already gotten a lot of great information. You can see the kinds of opportunities that are available. My particular research, I'm working in California and the Western US generally on hunting and gathering societies. So small scale society, there's my phone again, but in any case, So I do field work, not as much anymore, and lab work. So to work with me, and probably a lot of other professors as well, take the methods class that will give you the skills to work with the professor. And that's usually where I find my student, either volunteers or I've actually had students working for me. I've been fortunate to get contracts or grants where students have been able to be paid to do research with me. So I teach this lithic analysis class, right? This analysis of flakestone tools. I took a student to the field many years ago now out in Nevada, and we were doing archaeological survey, essentially, right? Looking at the ground, trying to find archaeological sites. And so his background in being able to identify and analyze stone tools was very helpful. But I had another student from that same lithic analysis class who I had help me on a project in Yosemite or from Yosemite, and she analyzed the shell beads and the glass trade beads. Now, those are totally different things. Those aren't stone tools, takes different analytical skill, but in terms of recording and in terms of me feeling confident that she could do detailed work and carefully record the information, I felt really comfortable with having her be a student because I had seen her work in the lithic analysis class. I also had an opportunity to just take a student to the field a couple of years ago on a partnership with the National Park Service. We backpacked into northern Yosemite and excavated an archaeological site there with the National Park Service crew. And then I did the analysis and most of the reporting on that. And the student helped me again in the lab on that. So if students have the necessary skills because they've taken the methods class, that's sort of, the methods that I need, that's really helpful. But sometimes there's other things that students can do that don't require technical expertise. I had a student who never worked for me, never had a class with me even, come and ask if she could help in my lab. And so I had her taking photographs of artifacts, right? That doesn't necessarily require too much technical skill. So there are those opportunities too. But, getting to know the professor and taking a lab class, especially where they can get to know you and get to know your skills in terms of recording and note keeping and being a diligent researcher will help you make those connections to potentially work with the faculty, either in a paid position or as a volunteer in the field or in the lab.
Thank you. And I think just going along with experience opportunities, how would you say like internships within like your disciplines? How does that look like? Is it different? Does it look different than research experience, or is it similar?
I think internships are really helpful. I'll give you an example. My phone's ringing again. This is the trouble with being at home with these robocallers in the middle of the day. But I had an internship when I was an undergraduate. It actually wasn't with a professor and it wasn't on campus. It was through something called the Student Conservation Association. They have internships across the US. Mostly back in my day, it was with the Park Service and the Forest Service. They've now expanded quite a bit beyond that to nonprofits and state parks and a lot of other things. And their internships range from, my brother was one and he studied bighorn sheep in Zion National Park, whereas I was an archaeologist and I did archaeological survey and a little bit of excavation in Idaho. So you can get that experience, and that internships in general are going to get you experience, but even more importantly, in some ways, they're going to get you connections. And those connections are going to help develop your network that will allow you to get opportunities professionally that you would not necessarily have gotten. So I did this field season in Idaho. My boss thought I was so wonderful that he wanted to hire me the next year to be a real archaeologist and get paid to do the work. As it turned out, it didn't quite work out for various reasons, but I had applied to the Forest Service for a seasonal job. And so I was a wilderness ranger that summer. And one of the reasons I was a wilderness ranger is because the guy I was working for thought archaeology was kind of cool. And he saw that I had this archaeological experience. And so I worked for a summer as a wilderness ranger. But again, I did a good enough job for him that he lent me to the archaeologists in our district for a week or two to help with an archaeological project. And that made all of the rest of the connections for the rest of my career, literally. that made the connections for the rest of my career. So internships are really important if you can get them. And the Anthropology and Heritage Studies program departmental website has a page on student resources and lists various internship opportunities, really generally, with various organizations and so forth, not specific, but links to pages that will tell students about various kinds of internship opportunities.
When Kitsia first asked that question, she got a little bit of a blank look from the three of us. And I think that that's because we often don't think about undergraduates as interns. They're participants in the projects, and often they're treated kind of equally. The volunteers versus interns versus research opportunity students, where they're working with us, but otherwise they're not really differentiated. They're really just different routes of coming into the research community. And I don't, at least personally, make much discrimination between them. It's the big difference to the students is where can they get a little funding to help with this, which can be really nice for students. And another point is that I've discovered over the years that students really benefit from being active and seeking out these opportunities, as opposed to just bumping into them, for instance, in flyers on campus. There really are a lot of opportunities for students nationwide these days. Lots of universities like to offer them, and lots of professors, and there are other organizations too, like nonprofits sometimes offer opportunities for students. However, those are ones where you need to go looking around for them. When you're sitting idle at your laptop, take a look around. Google for undergraduate opportunities in anthropology, undergraduate opportunities for research, and see what's out there.
Yeah, you can even set up, I like to set up Google alerts, and my husband's been looking for a job since we moved to UC Merced. So we've set up a lot of these for his particular field. And it's very easy with Google alerts to set up, anthropology internships, California, or wherever your parents live, or whatever you want to do. Other good sources of those kinds of opportunities would be the Anthropology listserv, I think it's the Anthropology Club, but it's AHS. There are Heritage Studies opportunities too, that could be posted there as well. So that's the best way, if I know of an opportunity to communicate it to students, to distribute it that way and through the course, through our classes.
Thank you. And just for the final question before we end, what advice would you give our students so that they are more prepared for life after graduation?
My personal advice would be to start getting serious about discovering your interests early in your career at UC Merced. Something I bump into a lot is students who make a decision very late in their university career to, for instance, go to graduate school. And going to graduate school is something where it's a really good possibility for anthropology students, but it's also something where the most competitive students have a little bit of experience as volunteers or interns or employees in laboratories. And that's something you can't get at the last minute. Even if you're not fully committed, it's really valuable to be always doing something like that. Even if it's not in anthropology, a psychology student or a biology student, just being active in building your career outside the classroom is an important thing to start early. I recommend it early. It doesn't need to be 100% commitment to one particular field, but it does need to start early.
Yeah, I agree with that. Getting whatever kinds of hands-on experience you can get, even if you end up hating it, is a really valuable data point for yourself. I don't remember where I read the stats, but it's it's just the fact that I'm a I'm a zennial. I'm not a millennial, I'm a zennial. I'm like right between millennials and Gen Xers. But Gen Xers and younger are just not staying in the same jobs or even the same professions for very long. It's becoming so common for more people hop around to different kinds of jobs in different industries, in different fields than have ever been before. So learn different kinds of things, be open to different kinds of experiences, and always be reflecting about what you enjoyed and what you didn't, because that's a really good thing to know. If you go to graduate school in archaeology, because you did great in Dr. Hull's classes, and then you go, you decide you want to specialize in the archaeology of the Andes, and you go up to Bolivia to work at like 4,500 meters above sea level, and you get there and you just find that you cannot hang at that elevation. It's really tough. I can't do it. I work down in the much lower, easier elevations. Then that might be really disappointing for you. And you want to get to know those kinds of things as much as money and time will allow for. You want to get to know while you're in undergrad what kinds of things you enjoy doing, what kinds of places you enjoy going. Do you enjoy being able to speak other languages? Do you enjoy working with community members? Do you like working with kids? Do you hate it? Do you hate data entry, and would you rather be doing something more creative? All of those are really important things to learn about yourself, and now's the time to learn them.
I think
a positive spin on it is that it's its own kind of exploring. Professors know that students come work in their lab, and maybe the student becomes obsessed and maybe they move on. I have a brief funny story that relates to this. The person I did my PhD with said when he was a graduate student, he tried out archaeology in the desert Southwest. And he said it just wasn't for him. Working on these sites out in the heat, he settled into being an analyst so he could work inside with air conditioning and a chalkboard. And both of those are good options. I find that I really enjoy being out in difficult conditions.
That's all great advice. And the note that I had sort of made to myself about what I was going to say plugs in beautifully with what they just said. Be self-reflective, right? Think about what it is where you want to go or where you think you want to go and how you would get there, and figure out the pieces that you need to get there, right? What skills do you need to develop? Where do you need to develop those skills? How do you need to develop those skills? Whether it's in a profession through job training, on the job training, or, those kinds of things. Or so self-reflect and think about, where you can sort of fill out the puzzle of you. The other thing I would say, and Beth kind of touched on this, that, most people are going to change careers at some point or have some change. I've always been an archaeologist. I've been an archaeologist. My first field season was when I was 19 and I'm 62. So I've always been an archaeologist. But I went back for my PhD when I was 35 and I got it when I was 42. Right. And so we can retool or we can add to our portfolio at different times in our life and make those, tweaks. We can't necessarily make a huge change, right? If I wanted to become a physician in the middle of my life, that would be another thing. But
people do it.
But people do it too, right? So self-reflect and continue to self-reflect in life.
Thank you so much. So that concludes our panel with the Anthropology and Heritage Studies faculty. Thank you all.